Hello, right, it's the last few chapters of the Twits. What's going to happen? The Muggle Wumps are trying to get the better of him. The monkeys want to escape from the cage, and the roly-poly bird is there over from Africa on his travels, helping them. Reuben's still sitting here, so Reuben, wave hello. He doesn't want to say hello. There you go, there's his hand. And I'm going to read on until the end. So, Mr. and Mrs. Twit go off to buy guns. The next morning, when Mr. Twit came out with his huge basket, not a single bird was sitting on either the cage or the big dead tree. They were all perched happily on the roof of Mr. Twit's house. The roly-poly bird was up there as well, and the monkeys were in the cage, and the whole lot of them were hooting with laughter at Mr. Twit. "I'll wipe that silly laugh off your beaks," Mr. Twit screamed at the birds. "I'll get you next time, you filthy, feathery frumps. I'll wring your necks, the whole lot of you, and have you bubbling in the pot for bird pie before this day is out." "How are you going to do that?" asked Mrs. Twit, who had come outside to see what all the noise was about. "I won't have you smearing sticky glue all over the roof of the house." Mr. Twit got very excited. "I've got a great idea," he cried. He didn't bother to keep his voice down because he didn't think the monkeys could understand. "We'll both go into town right away and we'll buy a gun each," he shouted. "How's that?" "Brilliant!" cried Mrs. Twit, grinning and showing her long yellow teeth. "We'll buy those big shotguns that spray out 50 bullets or more with each bang." "Exactly," said Mr. Twit. Look on the house while I go and make sure the monkeys are safely shut away." Mr. Twit went over to the monkey cage. "Attention!" he barked to his fearsome monkey trainer's voice. "Upside down, all of you, and jump to it. One on top of the other. Quick, get on with it, or you'll feel Mrs. Twit stick across your backsides." Obediently, the poor monkeys stood on their hands and clambered one on top of the other, with Muggle Wump at the bottom and the smallest child at the very top. "Now, stay there till we come back," said Mr. Twit. "Don't you dare move. Don't overbalance. When we return, or 2 or 3 hours' time, I shall expect to see you all in exactly the same position as you are now. You understand?" With that, Mr. Twit marched away. Mrs. Twit went with him, and the monkeys were left alone with the birds. And look at the poor monkeys having to sit upside down, one on top of the other. Muggle Wump has an idea. As soon as Mr. and Mrs. Twit had disappeared down the road, the monkeys all flipped back onto their feet the right way up. "Quick, get the key," Muggle Wump called out to the roly-poly bird, who was still sitting on the roof of the house. "What key?" shouted the roly-poly bird. "The key to the door of the cage," cried Muggle Wump. "It's hanging on a nail in the work shed. That's where he always puts it." The roly-poly bird flew down and came back with a key in his beak. Muggle Wump reached inside with his hand through the bars of the cage and took the key. He put it in the locks and turned it. The door opened. All 4 monkeys leapt out together. "We're free!" cried the 2 little ones. "Where shall we go, Dad? Where shall we hide?" "Don't get excited," said Muggle Wump. "Calm down, everybody. Before we escape from this beastly place, we have one very important thing to do." "What?" they asked him. "We are going to turn these terrible twits upside down." "We're going to what?" they cried. "You must be joking, Dad." "I'm not joking," Muggle Wump said. "We're going to turn both Mr. and Mrs. Twit upside down with their legs in the air." "Don't be ridiculous," the roly-poly bird said. "How can we possibly turn those 2 maggoty old monsters upside down?" We can, cried Muggle Wump. "We are going to make them stand on their heads for hours and hours, perhaps forever. Let them see what it feels like for a change." "How?" said the roly-poly bird. "Just tell me how." Muggle Wump laid his hand on one side, and a tiny twinkling little smile touched the corners of his mouth. "Now and again," he said, "but not very often, I have a brilliant idea. This is one of them. Follow me, my friends, follow me." He scampered off towards the house, and the other 3 monkeys and roly-poly bird after him. "Buckets and paintbrushes," cried Muggle Wump. "That's what we want next. There are plenty in the work shed. Hurry up, everybody. Get a bucket and paintbrush." Inside Mr. Twit's work shed, there was an enormous barrel of hug-tight sticky glue, the stuff he used for catching birds. "Fill your buckets," Muggle Wump ordered. "We are now going into the big house. Mrs. Twit had hidden the key to the front door under the mat, and Mugglewump had seen her doing it, so it was easy for them to get in. In they went, all 4 monkeys with their buckets of sticky glue. Then came the roly-poly bird in after them with a bucket in his beak and a brush in his claw. The great glue painting begins. This is the living room, announced Mugglewump, the grand and glorious living room where those 2 fearful, frumptuous freaks eat bird pie every week for supper. Please don't mention bird pie again, said the roly-poly bird. It gives me shudders. We mustn't waste time, cried Mugglewump. Hurry up, hurry up. Now, the first thing is this. I want everyone to paint sticky glue all over the ceiling, cover it all, smear it in every corner. Over the ceiling, they cried. Why the ceiling? Never mind why, shouted Mugglewump. Just do as you're told and don't argue. But how do we get up there? They asked. We can't reach. Monkeys can reach anywhere, said Mugglewump. He was in a frenzy of excitement now, waving his paintbrush and his bucket and leaping about all over the room. Come on, come on! Jump on the tables, stand on the chairs, hop on each other's shoulders. Roly-poly, come do it flying. Don't stand there gaping. We have to hurry, don't you understand? Those terrible twits will be back any moment. And this time they'll have guns. Get on with it, for heaven's sake, get on with it. And so the great glue painting of the ceiling began, and all the birds who had been sitting on the roof flew in to help, carrying paintbrushes in their claws and beaks. There were buzzards, magpies, rooks, ravens, and many more. Every one was splashing away like mad, and with so many helpers, the job was soon finished. You see all those birds helping out. None of them want to be in the next bird pie. The carpet goes on the ceiling. What now? They all said, looking at Mugglewump. Ha ha! Cried Mugglewump. Now for the fun, now for the greatest upside-down trick of all. Are you ready? We're ready, said the monkeys. We're ready, said the birds. Pull out the carpet, shouted Mugglewump. Pull this huge carpet out from under the furniture and stick it onto the ceiling. Onto the ceiling, cried one of the small monkeys. But that's impossible, Dad. I'll stick you on the ceiling if you don't shut up, snapped Mugglewump. He's dotty, they cried. He's balmy, he's batty, he's nutty, he's screwy, he's wacky, cried the roly-poly bird. Poor old Muggles has gone off his wump at last. Oh, do stop shouting such rubbish and give me a hand, said Mugglewump, catching hold of one corner of the carpet. Pull, you nitwits, pull. The carpet was enormous. It covered the entire floor from wall to ceiling, from wall to wall. It had a great red and gold pattern on it. It's not easy to pull on an enormous carpet off of the floor when the room is full of tables and chairs. Pull, yelled Mugglewump. Pull, pull, pull. He was like a demon hopping round the room and telling everyone what to do. But you couldn't blame him. After months and months of standing on his head with his family, he couldn't wait for the time when the terrible Twits would be doing the same thing. At least that's what he hoped. With the monkeys and the birds all pulling and puffing, the carpet was dragged off the floor and finally hoisted up onto the ceiling. And there it stuck. All at once, the whole ceiling of the living room was carpeted in red and gold. Can you see them all working so hard to drag that carpet up to the ceiling? The furniture goes up. Now the table, the big table, shouted Mugglewump. Turn the table upside down and put a dollop of sticky glue onto the bottom of each leg. Then we shall stick that on the ceiling as well. Hoisting the huge table upside down onto the ceiling was not an easy job, but they managed it in the end. Will it stay there? They cried. Is the glue strong enough to hold it up? It's the strongest glue in the world, said Mugglewump. It's the special bird-catching, bird-killing glue for smearing on trees. Please, said the roly-poly bird, I've asked you before not to mention that subject. How would you like it if it was monkey pie they made every Wednesday and all your friends had been boiled up and went on talking about it? Oh, I do beg your pardon, said Mugglewump. I'm so excited I hardly know what I'm saying. Now the chairs, do the same with the chairs. All the chairs must be upside down, stuck on the ceiling and in the right places. Oh, do hurry up, everybody. Any moment now, those 2 filthy freaks are going to come rushing in with their guns. The monkeys, with the birds helping them, put glue on the bottom of each chair leg and hoisted them up to the ceiling. Now the smaller tables, shouted Mugglewump, and the big sofa, and the sideboard, and the lamps, and all of the tiny little things, the ashtrays, the ornaments, and that beastly plastic gnome on the sideboard, everything, absolutely everything, must be stuck onto the ceiling. It was terribly hard work. It was especially difficult to stick everything onto the ceiling in exactly the right place. But they got it done in the end. "What now?" asked the roly-poly bird. He was out of breath and so tired he could hardly flap his wings. "Now the pictures," cried Mugglewump. "Turn all the pictures upside down, and will one of you birds, please fly out to the road and watch to see when those frumptious freaks are coming back." "I'll go," said the roly-poly bird. "I'll sit on the telephone whilst and keep guard. It'll give me a rest." They only just finished the job when the roly-poly bird came swooping in, screaming, "They're coming back! They're coming back!" Quickly, the birds flew back onto the roof of the house. The monkeys rushed into their cage and stood upside down on top of one another. A moment later, Mr. and Mrs. Twit came marching into the garden, each carrying a fearsome-looking gun. "I'm glad to see those monkeys are still upside down," said Mr. Twit. "They're too stupid to do anything else," said Mrs. Twit. "Hey, look at all those cheeky birds still up there on the roof. Let's go inside and load our lovely new guns, and then it'll be bang, 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 and bird pie for supper." Just as Mr. and Mrs. Twit were about to enter the house, two black ravens swooped low over their heads. Each bird carried a paintbrush in its claw, and each paintbrush was smeared with sticky glue. As the ravens whizzed over, they brushed a streak of sticky glue onto the tops of Mr. and Mrs. Twit's head. They did it with the lightest touch. Even so, the Twits both felt it. "What was that?" cried Mrs. Twit. "Some beastly bird has dropped his dirty droppings on my head." "On mine too," cried Mr. Twit. I felt it. "Don't touch it," cried Mrs. Twit. "You'll get it all over your hands. Come inside and we'll wash it off at the sink." "Dirty, filthy brutes," yelled Mr. Twit. "I'll bet they did it on purpose. Just wait till I've loaded up my gun." Mrs. Twit got the key from under the doormat where Mugglewump had carefully replaced it, and into the house they went. "What's this?" gasped Mr. Twit as they entered the living room. "What's happened?" screamed Mrs. Twit. They stood in the middle of the room, looking up. All the furniture, the big table, the chairs, the sofa, the lamps, the little side tables, the cabinet with bottles of beer in it, the ornaments, the electric fire, the carpet, everything was stuck upside down onto the ceiling. The pictures were upside down on the walls, and the floor they were standing on was absolutely bare. What's more, it had been painted white to look like the ceiling. "Look!" screamed Mrs. Twit. "That's the floor! The floor's up there! This is the ceiling! We're standing on the ceiling!" "We're upside down!" gasped Mr. Twit. "We must be upside down! We're standing on the ceiling looking down at the floor." "Oh, help!" screamed Mrs. Twit. "Help! Help! I'm beginning to feel giddy." So am I, cried Mr. Twit. "I don't like this one little bit." "We're upside down and all the blood's going to my head," screamed Mrs. Twit. "If we don't do something quickly, I shall die. I know I will." "I've got it," cried Mr. Twit. "I know what we'll do. We'll stand on our heads, then anyway we'll be the right way up." So they stood on their heads, and of course, the moment the tops of their heads touched the floor, the sticky glue that the ravens had brushed on a few moments before did its job. They were stuck. They were pinned down, cemented, glued, fixed to the floorboards. Through a crack in the door, the monkeys watched. They jumped right out of the cage the moment the Twits had gone inside, and the roly-poly bird watched, and all the other birds flew in and out to catch a glimpse of this extraordinary sight. That evening, Mugglewump and his family went up to the big wood on the top of the hill, and in the tallest tree of all, they built a marvellous treehouse. All the birds, especially the big ones, the crows and rooks and magpies, made their nests around the treehouse so that nobody could see it from the ground. "You can't stay up here forever, you know," the roly-poly bird said. "Why not?" said Mugglewump. "It's a lovely place." "Just you wait till the winter comes," the roly-poly bird said. "Monkeys don't like cold weather, do they?" "They most certainly don't," cried Mugglewump. "Are the winters so very cold over here?" "It's all snow and ice," said the roly-poly bird. "Sometimes it's so cold a bird will wake up in the morning with his feet frozen to the bough that he's been roosting on." "Then what shall we do?" cried Mugglewump. "My family will all be deep frozen." "Oh, no, they won't," said the roly-poly bird, "because when the first leaves start falling from the trees in the autumn, you can all fly home to Africa with me." "Don't be ridiculous," Mugglewump said. "Monkeys can't fly." "You can sit on my back," said the roly-poly bird. "I shall take you one at a time. You will travel by roly-poly superjet, and it won't cost you a penny." The Twits get the shrinks. Down here in the horrid house, Mr. and Mrs. Twit are still stuck upside down to the floor of the living room. "It's all your fault," yelled Mr. Twit, thrashing his legs in the air. "You're the one, you ugly old cow, who went hopping around shouting, 'Ooh, we're upside down, we're upside down.' And you're the one who said to stand on your head so we'd be the right way up, you whiskery old warthog," screamed Mrs. Twit. "Now we'll never get free. We're stuck here forever." "You may be stuck here forever," said Mr. Twit, "but not me. I'm going to get away." Mr. Twit wriggled and squirmed, and he squiggled and wormed, and he twisted and turned, and he choggled and churned, but the sticky glue held him to the floor just as tightly as it had once held the poor birds to the big dead tree. He was still upside down as ever, standing on his head, but heads are not made to be stood upon. If you stand on your head for a very long time, a horrid thing happens, and this was where Mr. Twit got his biggest shock of all. With so much weight on it from up above, his head began to get squashed into his body. Quite soon it had disappeared completely, sunk out of sight in the fatty folds of his flabby neck. "I'm shrinking," burbled Mr. Twit. "So am I," cried Mrs. Twit. "Help me, save me, call a doctor," yelled Mr. Twit. "I'm getting the dreaded shrinks." So it was. Mrs. Twit was getting the dreaded shrinks too, and this time it wasn't fake, it was the real thing. Their heads shrank into their necks, then their necks began shrinking into their bodies, and their bodies began shrinking into their legs, and their legs began shrinking into their feet. And 1 week later, on a nice sunny afternoon, a man called Fred came round to read the gas meter. When nobody answered the door, Fred peeped inside the house, and there he saw, on the floor of the living room, 2 bundles of old clothes, 2 pairs of shoes, and a walking stick. There was nothing more left in this world of Mr. and Mrs. Twit, and everyone, including Fred, shouted, "Hooray!" Well, couldn't have happened to a nicer couple. They were truly horrid. I hope you enjoyed it. I think the Twits is an excellent story, and I'm very glad that Mugglewump and his family and the roly-poly bird all managed to escape, and all the other birds too. Thank you for listening. Till next time.